What if I told you that right after the most intense month of worship, right after you have pushed yourself through hunger, thirst, long nights and quiet prayers, there is still a reward waiting that could equal an entire year of fasting? Most people think the story ends with Eid. They celebrate, they relax, they return to normal life, believing they have done their part. But what if that is only the beginning of something even more powerful? Something quieter, something that separates those who simply participated in Ramadan from those who truly understood it. Before we go deeper, take a moment and share where you are watching from. And if this kind of reminder strengthens your connection to Islam, then stay with us and support this journey, because what comes next might change the way you look at the days after Eid forever. There is a moment right after Eid that feels almost strange. The nights are no longer filled with long prayers. The routine shifts and the intensity of Ramadan fades quickly. It is as if the entire world exhales at once. But within that silence, there is a practice rooted deeply in the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that many people overlook. It is not loud, it is not widely celebrated, and it does not come with the same atmosphere as Ramadan, yet its reward is described in a way that should make every believer pause. This is the fasting of 6 days in the month of Shawwal, the very month that begins immediately after Ramadan ends. It is not an obligation. No one is forced to do it, but it is an invitation, a continuation, a quiet opportunity to hold on to what Ramadan built inside you. When everything around you slows down spiritually, this is your chance to keep moving forward. To understand its true weight, you have to look at the words of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, preserved in an authentic narration in Sahih Muslim. He said that whoever fasts the month of Ramadan and then follows it with 6 days from Shawwal, it is as if he has fasted the entire year. This is not a metaphor meant to sound inspiring. It is a precise promise rooted in how rewards are multiplied in Islam. Every good deed is rewarded 10 times over, and sometimes even more by the mercy of Allah. When you fast the 30 days of Ramadan, it is as if you have fasted 300 days. Then when you add 6 more days, those become 60. Together, they complete the cycle of a full year. Think about that carefully, because it changes everything. What seems like a small effort, just 6 additional days, becomes something enormous in the sight of Allah. This is how Islam transforms simple acts into lifelong rewards, not by increasing the burden, but by increasing the value of sincerity. And there is something deeply profound about when this opportunity appears. It does not come in the middle of Ramadan when motivation is high and everyone around you is doing the same thing. It comes after, when the crowd has moved on, when the discipline begins to weaken, when the heart is tested. Shawwal becomes a mirror. It reveals whether Ramadan was just a season you passed through or a transformation that stayed with you. Fasting these 6 days is not just about gaining reward, it is about proving something to yourself, that your connection to Allah did not end with the sighting of the moon, that your ibadah was not tied to a calendar, but rooted in something deeper. And that is where the real difference begins to show, quietly, without announcement, without attention, but with a weight that carries far beyond what the eye can see. Now the question naturally begins to form in the mind, and it is an important one, because clarity here determines whether a person takes action or delays it until the opportunity quietly slips away. When exactly should these 6 days be fasted? And how should they be approached in a way that aligns with the guidance of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him? The beauty of this ibadah is that it is built on ease, not restriction. The only day in Shawwal when fasting is not allowed is the day of Eid itself, because that day is meant for celebration, gratitude, and nourishment after a full month of restraint. It is a day when fasting is actually prohibited, a reminder that Islam is balanced, that it knows when to ask you to hold back and when to ask you to enjoy what has been given. But once that day passes, the door opens wide, and it stays open throughout the entire month. You're not required to rush into it immediately. although some people prefer to begin right after Eid to maintain the rhythm they built during Ramadan. Others may choose to space the days out, fasting one day, then taking a break, then returning again later in the month. Both approaches are valid, and both fall within the flexibility that the scholars have derived from the teachings of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. There is no strict sequence that must be followed, no fixed pattern that must be copied. This flexibility is not random, it is intentional. It reflects a deeper understanding of human nature, that people have different schedules, different responsibilities, different levels of strength. By allowing this ibadah to be spread out or grouped together, Islam removes the excuse of difficulty. It becomes accessible to the student, the worker, the parent, the traveler. It becomes something that fits into your life, rather than something that disrupts it completely. And yet, within this flexibility, there is still a subtle encouragement toward consistency. If someone chooses to fast the 6 days consecutively, there is a certain momentum that carries them forward, a continuation of the discipline that Ramadan established. It feels like an extension rather than a restart. But if someone cannot do that, then spreading them out becomes its own form of consistency, a steady return to fasting across the month, a repeated reminder that the connection to Allah is still alive. In both cases, what matters is not the pattern itself, but the sincerity behind it and the commitment to complete it before Shawwal comes to an end. Because once the month passes, that specific opportunity with that specific promise is gone. There is also an important principle that cannot be ignored, and it is one that reflects the structure of worship in Islam as a whole. If a person has missed days from Ramadan, whether due to illness, travel, or any valid reason that allowed them to break their fast, then those days are not simply forgotten. They remain a responsibility that must be fulfilled. The scholars consistently emphasize that these missed fasts should be made up before turning to the voluntary fasts of Shawwal. This is not just a technical ruling, it carries a deeper meaning. It teaches that what is obligatory takes priority over what is optional. It reinforces the idea that building a strong foundation comes before adding extra layers. The hadith itself carries this implication when it says, "Whoever fasts Ramadan and then follows it with 6 days of Shawwal." The sequence matters. Completing Ramadan does not only mean experiencing it, it means fulfilling it fully, including making up any days that were missed. Only then does the person move into the voluntary fasts that follow. This order preserves the integrity of ibadah. It ensures that a person is not seeking additional reward while leaving behind what was already required of them. There is a kind of honesty in this approach, a grounding that keeps the pursuit of reward sincere rather than superficial. At the same time, scholars have also discussed the situation of someone who may choose to fast the 6 days first due to time constraints, especially if they fear that the month of Shawwal might end before they complete both. While opinions differ on the ideal sequence, the safest and strongest approach remains to prioritize the missed fasts of Ramadan. This reflects caution, discipline, and a respect for what Allah has made obligatory. It also aligns with a broader pattern in Islam, where obligations are always given precedence and voluntary acts are seen as a means of increasing reward, not replacing responsibility. Beyond the rulings in the structure, there is a deeper wisdom that begins to unfold when you look at why these 6 days exist in the first place. Ramadan is not meant to be a temporary state that disappears the moment the month ends. It is meant to train, to reshape habits, to build a new level of awareness. But human nature is such that without continuation, even the strongest habits can fade quickly. The discipline that felt natural during Ramadan can suddenly feel heavy once the environment changes. The early mornings become harder, the restraint becomes weaker, the focus begins to drift. This is where the 6 days of Shawwal step in, not as an obligation, but as a bridge. They connect one state to another. They prevent a sudden drop. They ease the transition from the intensity of Ramadan into the rhythm of everyday life without losing everything that was gained. Fasting again so soon after Ramadan keeps the body familiar with restraint, and it keeps the heart familiar with obedience. It sends a message that what was built in Ramadan is not being abandoned. Instead, it is being protected, reinforced, and carried forward. There is also something profoundly personal about fasting in Shawwal. During Ramadan, you are surrounded by people who are all engaged in the same act. There is a shared atmosphere, a collective energy that supports you even on your weakest days. But in Shawwal, that atmosphere is gone. Most people are eating normally, going about their routines without the same level of ibadah. When you choose to fast in that environment, it becomes quieter. It becomes more private. It becomes an act that is less influenced by others and more rooted in your own intention. And this is where sincerity begins to deepen. Because when no one else is doing it, when there is no external pressure or shared environment pushing you forward, the only reason you continue is because you want to, because you value what Allah has promised, because you are holding on to something that cannot be seen but is deeply felt. This transforms the act from something communal into something intimate. It becomes a conversation between you and your Creator, one that is not interrupted by the noise of expectation or the desire to be seen. And perhaps this is one of the greatest wisdoms behind these 6 days. They test whether Ramadan truly changed you or simply passed over you. They reveal whether your worship was tied to a specific time or connected to something deeper within you. They show whether you are willing to continue when the ease of al-Jama'ah is gone and only the strength of your own intention remains. In this way, the 6 days of Shawwal are not just an extension of fasting, they are a reflection of who you have become after Ramadan. There is a moment after Ramadan that most people do not talk about, a quiet shift that happens almost unnoticed. During Ramadan, everything feels aligned. The environment supports you, the rhythm is shared, the struggle is collective. You wake up knowing millions are waking up with you. You fast knowing millions are holding back just like you. And you break your fast knowing the entire world is experiencing that same relief. There is strength in that unity. There is comfort in knowing you are not alone. But when Shawwal begins, that atmosphere disappears almost overnight. The nights grow quieter, the routines return, and the sense of al-Jama'ah fades into the background. And this is where something deeper begins to emerge, something that separates habit from sincerity. Because anyone can remain consistent when they are surrounded by people doing the same thing. Anyone can stay disciplined when the environment is built to support that discipline. But what happens when that support is gone? What happens when you are the only one fasting on a random day in Shawwal, surrounded by people eating, working, and moving on with their lives? This is where sincerity is tested in its purest form. This is where intention is no longer supported by external factors, but carried entirely by what is inside you. Fasting in Shawwal becomes quieter, more personal, almost invisible. And that is exactly what gives it weight. It is no longer about keeping up with a global rhythm. It is no longer about being part of a shared experience. It becomes a private decision, repeated day after day, without attention, without recognition, without the feeling of being carried by a larger wave. You wake up and choose it. You go through your day and protect it. You complete it knowing that very few people even realize what you are doing. And in that quiet, something powerful happens. Your worship becomes yours. It becomes something that is not influenced by others, not shaped by expectation, but built purely on your relationship with Allah. This is why the scholars often speak about hidden acts of worship as being among the most sincere. When an act is done without being seen, without being praised, without even being noticed, it becomes purified from the desire for recognition. It becomes something that exists only for Allah. And fasting in Shawwal carries a piece of that quality. It is not completely hidden, but it is far less visible than fasting in Ramadan. It does not come with announcements or shared excitement. It exists quietly, and because of that, it has the potential to be deeply sincere. And then there is another layer that many people overlook, something that speaks directly to the imperfections of human effort. No matter how strong your Ramadan was, no matter how disciplined you felt, no matter how focused you tried to be, there were moments that fell short. There were distractions, there were missed opportunities, there were times when the heart was not as harder as it could have been. This is not a failure, it is part of being human. But Allah, in His mercy, does not leave those gaps unaddressed. He provides ways to repair them, to strengthen what was weak, to complete what was incomplete. The 6 days of Shawwal serve this purpose in a way that is both subtle and profound. Just as voluntary prayers can compensate for deficiencies in obligatory prayers, these voluntary fasts can help cover the shortcomings of Ramadan. They act like a form of completion, a way of reinforcing what may have been fragile. When you fast these additional days, you are not starting something new. You are strengthening what you already began. You are taking the foundation of Ramadan and adding stability to it, ensuring that it does not crumble under the weight of human imperfection. This understanding changes the way you approach these 6 days. They are not just an opportunity for extra reward, although that reward is immense. They are also a form of rahmah, a form of care from Allah that allows you to improve what you could not perfect. Instead of leaving Ramadan behind with uncertainty, wondering whether it was enough, you are given a chance to build on it, to reinforce it, to walk away from it stronger than when you entered. And that in itself is a gift that should not be taken lightly. There is also a transformation that begins to take place within the self when these 6 days are observed. It is not always immediate, and it is not always obvious, but it is real. When you continue fasting after Ramadan, you send a message to your own nafs, a message that reshapes your identity. You are no longer someone who fasts only when it is required. You become someone who chooses to fast even when it is not required. And that shift, although it may seem small, carries a deep impact. Because identity drives behavior. When you begin to see yourself as someone who remains consistent beyond obligation, your actions begin to align with that identity in other areas as well. Your prayers become more stable. Your awareness becomes more constant. Your connection to Allah becomes less dependent on specific times and more integrated into your daily life. Instead of Ramadan being a peak followed by a decline, it becomes a turning point that leads into steady growth. And perhaps one of the most powerful aspects of all of this is how quietly it happens. There are no dramatic announcements. There is no visible transformation that others immediately recognize. It unfolds internally, day by day, choice by choice, in moments that no one else sees. But those moments accumulate. They build something real, something lasting, something that carries forward long after Shawwal has ended. So when you look at these 6 days, do not see them as a small extension of Ramadan. See them as a test of sincerity, a means of repair, and a step toward transformation. They reveal whether your worship was tied to a moment or rooted in a commitment. They give you the chance to strengthen what was weak and continue what was strong. And most importantly, they offer you a path to turn the temporary intensity of Ramadan into a lasting connection that defines the rest of your year. If you pause for a moment and truly reflect on the scale of what is being offered here, it almost feels overwhelming. 6 days. That is all it takes. Not 6 months, not an entire season of effort, just 6 days placed carefully after Ramadan, and yet the reward stretches across an entire year. This is not a small multiplication, it is a transformation of effort into something far greater than what the action itself seems to deserve. And this is one of the most beautiful patterns found in Islam, that Allah does not measure your deeds the way humans measure effort. He multiplies, expands, and elevates even the simplest actions when they are done with sincerity and consistency. So imagine someone who understands this and acts upon it every single year. Ramadan comes, they fast it fully, then they follow it with 6 days of Shawwal. Year after year, cycle after cycle, their record begins to reflect something incredible. It is as if they have been fasting continuously, as if there has been no break, as if their ibadah has stretched across time without interruption. And when you think about a lifetime, the impact becomes even more profound. 10 years pass, 20 years pass, 30 years pass, and each year carries the weight of a full year of fasting in the sight of Allah. What appears small in daily life becomes massive when viewed from the perspective of the hereafter. This is how a person builds something azim without even realizing the full extent of what they are accumulating. It is quiet, it is steady, it is consistent, and that is exactly what gives it strength. Because grand actions that are done once may impress the eye, but it is the consistent, repeated acts that build a mountain of reward over time. But there is something even deeper hidden within this practice. Something that goes beyond reward and enters into the question of acceptance. Every believer who completes Ramadan carries a silent question in their heart. Was it accepted? Did my fasting count? Did my efforts reach where I hoped they would reach? This question is natural, and it is a sign of sincerity because it shows that the person is not satisfied with simply completing the action. They are concerned about its value in the sight of Allah. And while no one can claim with certainty that their deeds have been accepted, the scholars have pointed to signs, subtle indicators that suggest a positive outcome. One of the most important of these signs is what comes after. When a good deed is followed by another good deed, it is often seen as an indication that the first was accepted. It is as if Allah opens another door for you because you walked through the first one sincerely. So when you find yourself drawn to fasting in Shawwal, when you feel the desire to continue even after Ramadan has ended, do not dismiss that feeling. It may not just be motivation. It may be an invitation. It may be a sign that what you did in Ramadan was accepted, and now you are being given the opportunity to build upon it. This perspective changes everything. Instead of seeing the 6 days as an optional extra, you begin to see them as a continuation of something that has already been acknowledged. It becomes less about forcing yourself and more about responding to an opening that has been placed in front of you. And this is where sincerity deepens even further, because you are no longer just chasing reward. You are responding to a relationship. You are continuing a conversation that began in Ramadan, refusing to let it end abruptly. At the same time, there is a quiet warning hidden within all of this. Opportunities like this are not guaranteed to return in the same way. Every year that passes is a gift, but it is not promised. There are people who fasted Ramadan last year who are not here to witness Shawwal this year. There are people who had the intention to fast these 6 days, but never got the chance to complete them. When you realize this, the urgency becomes real. It is no longer something to delay or postpone. It becomes something to act upon while the door is still open. And then there is the final question that lingers, one that each person must answer for themselves. Will you treat Ramadan as a single event that came and went, or will you treat it as the beginning of a new direction? Because the difference between the two is not found in what you did during Ramadan, but in what you do after it. Anyone can rise during a peak season, but not everyone continues when the season ends. Anyone can be carried by a wave, but not everyone can keep moving when the water becomes still. The 6 days of Shawwal sit exactly at that point of decision. They are simple, accessible, within reach of almost anyone, and yet they are often left behind. Not because they are difficult, but because they are quiet. They do not come with the same energy, the same atmosphere, the same external push. They require something more internal, something more deliberate, and that is precisely why they matter. So as the days of Shawwal pass, one after another, the opportunity remains in front of you. It does not demand attention, it does not force itself into your routine, but it is there, waiting. 6 days that can reshape an entire year. 6 days that can strengthen what was built in Ramadan. 6 days that can quietly elevate your record in ways you may not fully understand until you stand before Allah. And perhaps that is the most powerful part of all of this. You may never fully see the impact of these 6 days in this life. You may never feel the full weight of their reward while you are here. But one day, when everything is laid out clearly, when every action is accounted for, when every moment is revealed, you may find that these 6 quiet days, chosen willingly, carried sincerely, became something far greater than you ever imagined. And on that day, you will not wish you had done less. You will only wish you had done more.